Today we're having a ramble on around Northampton, and here's the first port of call, a strange little place just opposite Morrison's really, and it's known as the Swiss Cottage. I think at one stage it used to be a tea rooms. There was some conjecture that it was part of the railway because the station St John's was around these parts, but I think most people in the know say it was just built like this. It looks, I'm not sure whether anybody lives in it nowadays, but there's our starting point, and now up the hill to the Guildhall. So up the hill, and the first thing that we notice is this quite modern theatre, the Royal and Derngate. It's actually spliced on very cleverly to the original theatre, the Royal, which is just round the corner. There's just been a lot of investment in the museum, which we'll see in a moment. It was meant to open last June. Millions of pound refurbishment and a special section on the shoe and boot making in the town, but unfortunately it hasn't opened yet. Up the hill, the same hill, towards the Guildhall, and on the right here we can see the Royal Theatre and Opera House, which is now being attached to the big new building. Never been in, hope to soon. I've only actually lived in these parts for about 18 months, and more than 12 months of that has been in lockdown, so probably a lot of people watching this know a lot more about Northampton than I do, but today we're just picking out some of my favourite bits that we found, some of the older heritage buildings. And there's the Museum and Art Gallery, which I will be visiting when it opens, and we'll go and have a look at the Guildhall now. What a magnificent building. The Guildhall, built in the neo-Gothic style in 1864. And this is called St Giles's Square. Very quiet today on a cold Tuesday afternoon. And we're walking now down Derngate. Almost at the end of Derngate we have Bedford Mansions, which was built in the 1930s in the Art Deco style. It had a roof garden up there, and it still retained most of its features, which is quite nice. And then along here on the right we have the famous 72 Derngate, which was the famous Charles Rennie Mackintosh designed house. It was bought, originally it was built in 1815, and then the Bassett Loke family bought the house in 1917, and Charles Rennie Mackintosh carried out all the interior design. Remotely, as it happened. Don't think he actually came here, but it's well worth a visit. It's been excellently preserved. And there's a little tea rooms and cafe next door to it. It's known as a gem of the arts and crafts movement. It's grade 2 listed, and the Bassett Loke family were well known for model manufacturing, boats, trains, wagons, and he also had a country country retreat country retreat, just 2 miles south, which again was renovated by Charles Rennie Mackintosh in his Grade 2 listed. Retracing our steps back towards town, this is the onslaught of the Royal and Derngate Theatre. I think it would probably be called brutalist architecture. Not sure really whether I like it, but it's there. And we're now going to turn right up Castilian Street. In Victorian days, Northampton must have changed so much. All these stone buildings, this one says 1882, and this is where Castilian Street got its name from, because we've got this 1914-18, the date plaque says on this one. Looks a very interesting building. It's got the stained glass windows have got crosses on, so must have been an ecclesiastical building. And then Memorial Hall, it says right up there, and over the door we've got this little plaque that says, "To the memory of the dead, for the good of those for whom they died." So it's obviously to do with the First World War. Very nice. And now we're going on to St Giles Street, which has some really interesting old buildings. Lots of the old buildings have retained their fronts, certainly at first level. This one here tells us that it's a St Thomas's Hospital charity, Richard Massingberg's gift, rebuilt 1864. Going up there. And this building on the corner here that's now all sorts of shops was obviously an Art Deco frontage there. But there's no evidence of what it used to be. So Giles Street has lots of independent shops. Here's an Art Deco frontage again, and farther up there towards the end there's a really well-known cheese shop, coffee shop, some nice cafes. We can see that Art Deco frontage there. Now we're standing back. It's a really interesting street, and we're coming up now to where it says the Ridings Arcade, which we'll have to go over the other side of the road to see it properly. It was the Co-op. The Co-op always had beautiful buildings. 1938, you could tell that without the date plaque really, couldn't you? Northampton Co-op Society. They were normally cream and green. How nice that it's still there and in such good condition. Not sure whether anything's going to reopen, because there's a lot derelict up here. Derelict shops and cafes. Everywhere closed. You can tell by how quiet it is. Somewhere else closed. Another one closed. closed, hairdressers. This magnificent building on the corner of Hazelwood Road now is 3 floors of really interesting things. It's called Vintage Guru. I managed to get a route round there before everything closed down. It was to do with the church. We're going to the church across the road, and it was some buildings connected with the church. This looks like an interesting row of buildings as well. Nothing on it to tell us what it was. And here's the cheese shop and the coffee shop that we mentioned before. Still open, hooray! St Giles's Church. Mainly 12th century. That clock looks old as well, doesn't it? It's a beautiful church. Quite a big graveyard. And at the end of the road there's some big Edwardian villas. Just across from the church is this, it's called the parochial school. Obviously used to be a school at some time, and now it's called St Giles's Church Centre, like a church hall, I suppose. A nice row of brick terraces there. Old Savoy Theatre, built in 1936, one of the gems of Northampton. Luckily it's still standing and still in good condition. It had a capacity for 2,000 people. It was built as a cinema and a theatre, so it had an orchestra pit. In the 60s it hosted the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and other big pop acts, and in the year 2000 it was bought by the Jesus Army and refurbished, and quite a lot of the interior was changed, but now thankfully it's owned by the council and it's opened as a community hub. So this is Abington Street. It's got some real gems of Victorian architecture and some Art Deco, but unfortunately there's a lot of modern shops got bodged in, lots of stuff demolished, and it's a bit of a mishmash really, but we'll go and have a look what we can find.